The grand conclave of the Xylo's hegemony was a chamber carved from the heart of a living mountain, a place where geology and biology had been coaxed into a union of silent, eternal majesty. Veins of softly glowing crystal pulsed with a rhythmic, organic light, tracing patterns across ceilings that soared into artificial twilight, mimicking the constellations of their homeworld's sky. Below, the floor was a seamless expanse of polished obsidian, reflecting the stoic, insectoid figures of the assembled progenitors, their carapaces gleaming in hues of jade, bronze, and cobalt. At the chamber's center, suspended in a column of gravitic energy, was the origin stone, a relic from their species, emergence, its surface swirling with milky nebulae of captured memory and ancestral wisdom. For generations uncounted, this chamber had been a bastion of stability, a place where challenges were met with logic, and fear was dissected by reason. But the silence that held the conclave now was not one of reverence. It was a fragile, crystalline thing, stretched taut by an anxiety that had no precedent in their vast, meticulously recorded history. Hypergenitor Vorlag, his own carapace the color of aged wood and deep forest shadow, rested his multifaceted hands upon the cool, living stone of his ceremonial dais. His gaze swept over the silent council, each progenitor a leader of their respective hive nexus, each a repository of immense knowledge and political weight. He could feel their collective disquiet as a low thrum in the very air of the chamber, a dissonance in the ancient harmony. The subject of their emergency session was a specter that had appeared on the edge of their sovereign space, a presence so alien, so utterly other, that it defied the established taxonomies of galactic life. They called themselves humans. Their arrival had not been with the roar of warships or the blare of a formal announcement, but with a whisper. For cycles, their probes, small, elegant, and impossibly quiet, had drifted through the outer systems, observing, cataloging, and then vanishing before a proper intercept could be established. Then the whisper had become a voice, a stream of complex, layered data broadcast on a universal frequency, a message of introduction that was both profoundly simple and maddeningly opaque. It offered greetings and spoke of a desire for peaceful exchange, yet it offered no information on their origins, their capabilities, or the true scope of their civilization. It was an invitation extended from a complete and total shadow. "They are a ghost," Strategos Kale declared, his voice a sharp, percussive series of clicks and chitters that echoed in the vast chamber. His bronze carapace was scored with the marks of old campaigns, and his posture was one of perpetual, aggressive readiness. He stood before the council, his shadow long and sharp on the obsidian floor. A specter that offers a hand while keeping a blade hidden in the dark. Their methods are not those of a nascent power seeking guidance, nor of a peer seeking alliance. It is the methodology of a predator studying its prey, learning its habits before the strike. They observe, they learn, they do not reveal. This is the logic of conquest. A murmur of assent rippled through the assembled progenitors. Kale's words resonated with their deepest instincts, the ancient survival codes etched into their genetic memory. The universe was a dangerous place. History had taught them that lesson through fire and loss. Power that did not declare itself was power that could not be trusted. Or, a softer voice interjected, it is the logic of caution. Archivist Lyra moved from the shadowed alcoves where the lore keepers resided. Her jade-green carapace was smooth and unblemished, her movements fluid and deliberate. She did not project the aggressive certainty of Kale, but a quiet, formidable intellect. Consider the possibility, strategos, that they have observed us as we have observed others. They have seen empires rise and fall. They have seen the ruin left by arrogant, expansionist powers. Perhaps their silence is not a threat but a courtesy, a sign of respect. They do not presume to understand us, and so they do not overwhelm us with their presence. They offer a dialogue, not a decree. "A dialogue on whose terms?" Kale countered, turning his multifaceted eyes toward her. "They have chosen the time, the place, and the method of this first contact. They hold all the strategic variables. We are reacting, not acting. From a military perspective, this is an untenable position. We are ceding the advantage before negotiations have even begun." Hypergenitor Vorlag listened, his ancient mind processing the two opposing poles of Xylo's thought, the pragmatism of the warrior and the idealism of the scholar. Both were essential to the hegemony's survival, but in this moment they created a schism of indecision that was more dangerous than any single course of action. He had studied the human signal himself. It was a masterpiece of information theory, a fractal of language, mathematics, and art that unfolded itself to the observer. It was not the crude broadcast of a young species, but the work of a civilization that had mastered the very medium of communication. It was elegant, beautiful, and deeply, deeply unsettling. There was a confidence to it, a calmness that did not align with Kale's vision of a hidden predator. Predators were driven by need, by hunger. This signal felt patient, as if it had all the time in the universe. Their technology is a paradox, Lyra continued, her voice holding the attention of the conclave. The probes we managed to scan before they cloaked, their energy signatures were clean, impossibly efficient. They leave no wake in spacetime, no thermal residue. They move as if the laws of physics are not obstacles to be overcome, but tools to be wielded with finesse. Yet the ships they travel in, the ones our long-range sensors have tentatively identified at the edge of the system, are aesthetically primitive by our standards. They are brutalist constructs of metal and energy, lacking the organic integration we value. They are machines, not organisms. It is as if their spirit and their tools are in opposition. It is a deception, Kale insisted. A deliberate projection of simplicity to lull us into a false sense of security. They show us a simple shell to hide the complexity within. We must assume their capabilities are an order of magnitude beyond what they have shown us. We must prepare for the worst-case scenario, a civilization whose technological reach is as vast as their secrecy. Vorlag finally raised a hand, and the chamber fell into a profound hush. Even the rhythmic glow of the crystal veins seemed to pause in deference. Strategos Kale's caution is the bedrock of our security, he began, his voice slow and resonant, carrying the weight of his authority. And Archivist Lyra's curiosity is the engine of our enlightenment. Both are true. We cannot dismiss the potential threat, nor can we blind ourselves to the potential for an unprecedented era of exchange. The humans have not made a demand. They have not crossed our designated borders. They have sent a message, an invitation. To refuse to answer is an answer in itself, an answer of fear. And fear is a poor foundation upon which to build a policy that will shape the future of the hegemony for millennia. He paused, letting his words settle into the minds of the progenitors. We will not meet silence with silence, nor will we meet a potential threat with open aggression. We will do what we have always done. We will seek to understand. We will send a diplomatic delegation. We will meet them face to face, and we will look into their eyes and see the truth of their intentions for ourselves. Kale's mandibles tightened, a clear sign of his deep disapproval. High Progenitor, this is a grave risk. To send our diplomats is to offer them hostages, to reveal our own nature while they remain a mystery. It is a calculated risk, Strategos, Vorlag replied, his tone final. And it is one we must take. We will not be ruled by shadows and speculation. Let the humans see our culture, our confidence, our desire for peaceful coexistence. Let them see that we are not a people to be trifled with, but also not a people who shrink from the unknown. Prepare the emissary vessel. Select your finest diplomats, Lyra. We will answer their message. And we will discover the nature of this ghost that now stands at our door. The decision was made. A ripple of tension, of reluctant acceptance, moved through the conclave. The progenitors bowed their heads in acknowledgement of the hypergenitor's wisdom. Yet, as the chamber began to empty, a cold dread settled deep within Vorlag's being. He gazed at the swirling nebulae within the origin stone, seeking guidance from the silent past. The humans were an unknown variable of immense magnitude. Their quiet patience felt less like a prelude to attack and more like the calm before a storm of cosmic significance. A storm the Xylo's hegemony was about to sail into willingly and utterly blind. The diplomatic vessel, the Weaver of Paths, was a thing of beauty and a testament to Xylo's artistry and engineering. It was not a warship. Its hull was a smooth, pearlescent shell that shifted in color with the ambient light, and it moved through the void with the silent grace of a deep-sea creature. Aboard, Ambassador Kalis, a seasoned diplomat chosen by Lyra for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect, reviewed the human data packet for the 100th time. He and his retinue were making their way to the designated coordinates, a lifeless moon orbiting a gas giant on the very edge of Xylo's territory. The location was neutral, militarily insignificant, a thoughtful choice that Kalis appreciated. It suggested a desire to minimize any perception of threat. As they approached, the human vessel came into view, and Kalis felt a slight tremor of disappointment, a confirmation of Lyra's assessment. It was functional. A collection of modules, engines, and antennae, all sharp angles and dull gray alloys. It possessed none of the elegance or biological harmony of a Xylo's ship. It was a tool, stark and unadorned, a thing built for a purpose and nothing more. It was called the Stardust Drifter. The name, transmitted in their own language after a flawless analysis of its structure, seemed almost poetically at odds with the ship's graceless form. The first meeting took place in a sterile white chamber aboard the human vessel. The air was a precise mixture of gases suitable for both species, another sign of meticulous preparation. The humans stood waiting. They were slighter than the Xylos, soft-skinned and fragile-looking, yet they carried themselves with an unnerving stillness. Their leader, a female named Eva Rostova, had pale eyes the color of a winter sky and a face that seemed incapable of expressing alarm or overt emotion. She wore a simple, dark blue uniform, as did her companions. There was no ceremony, no grand pronouncements. "Ambassador Kalis," she said, her voice even and clear, the Xylos language flowing from her lips with a fluency that was both impressive and disconcerting. "We thank you for accepting our invitation. We hope your journey was without incident." "It was, Ambassador Rostova," Kalis replied, his own voice a series of melodic clicks. "We are here to understand the nature of your presence in our region of space and to open a dialogue between our peoples." The initial conversations were a strange and frustrating exercise in philosophical circling. Kalis and his team sought specifics. Where was their homeworld? What was the size of their population? What were the capabilities of their fleet? Rostova and her team answered with generalities and abstract concepts. They spoke of shared galactic heritage, of the responsibilities of sentient life, and of the importance of establishing foundational trust before the exchange of strategic data. They were polite, respectful, and utterly immovable. They deflected every direct question about their strength or origins with a calm, logical explanation of why such information was premature. "To understand a civilization," Rostova explained during one session, her gaze steady and unwavering, "you must first understand its principles, not its inventory. To give you a list of our ships or the output of our energy sources would be to provide you with data without context. It would invite fear, comparison, and calculation. It would turn this dialogue into a negotiation of power. We are here to establish a relationship based on understanding, not on the threat of mutual destruction." Kalis felt a growing sense of being managed, of being led through a carefully constructed narrative. The humans were brilliant, he had to admit. Their logic was sound, their arguments compelling. But it was the logic of a superior entity patiently explaining itself to a lesser one. He felt a prickle of indignation, a feeling shared by his retinue. Were they being patronized? Was this entire exercise a test of their patience, a way for the humans to gauge their temperament? The frustration was palpable back on Xylos in the Grand Conclave. Strategos Kale saw his worst fears being realized. "They are playing with us," he declared, his voice booming through the chamber's comms link that showed the strained face of Ambassador Kalis. "This is a stalling tactic. They are using diplomacy as a screen while their fleets move into position. They are mapping our reactions, our psychological profile. This ambassador, Rostova, is not a diplomat. She is an intelligence operative of the highest order." Even Lyra, the eternal optimist, was troubled. "Their refusal to share basic information is problematic," she conceded. "It violates all known diplomatic protocols. Trust cannot be built in a vacuum. It requires a mutual vulnerability, a shared risk. The humans are asking for our trust while offering none of their own." It was on the 7th cycle of these fruitless negotiations that everything changed. An urgent, coded message flashed across the encrypted channels from Xylo's high command to the Weaver of Paths. A new energy signature had appeared in the system. It was massive, beyond any scale they had ever recorded. It had not entered through hyperspace or a known jump point. It had simply emerged, as if it had unfolded itself from the fabric of spacetime itself. Aboard the Stardust Drifter, the sterile white meeting room suddenly felt like a cage. Kalis was in the middle of a sentence when a soft chime sounded. One of Rostova's aides leaned in and whispered something to her. Her expression did not change, but Kalis noted a subtle shift in her posture, a new level of focus in her pale eyes. "Ambassador," she said, her voice still perfectly calm, "I must ask that you and your delegation observe the main view screen." The wall behind her dissolved, replaced by a live feed of the space around the gas giant. There, hanging in the void, was a ship. The word felt inadequate. It was a monument, a mobile mountain of metal and light. It was a vast geometric shape, a flattened arrowhead of impossible dimensions, its surface a mosaic of dark, non-reflective plating and shimmering energy conduits. It dwarfed the gas giant's largest moon. It eclipsed the distant stars. Its presence was so immense that the Xylo's sensors aboard the Weaver of Paths began to register minute gravitational distortions in its immediate vicinity. It had arrived in absolute silence, a silent god taking its place in the heavens. Kalis felt the blood drain from his circulatory system. His mandibles gaped. His companions let out a collective, involuntary hiss of shock and terror. This was it, the blade Kale had spoken of. It had been hidden not in the dark, but in a place beyond their comprehension. This was humanity's true face. The small, functional ships, the patient diplomacy, it was all a facade, a prelude to this overwhelming, soul-crushing revelation of power. "What is that?" Kalis managed to stammer, his diplomatic composure shattered. "That," Ambassador Rostova replied, her voice devoid of triumph or menace, "is the UNS Resolution. It is a Colossus-class vessel." The name echoed in the silent room. Colossus. A word from their translation matrix that meant a statue of gigantic size, a thing of myth and legend. It was an apt name. The ship just sat there, motionless, its power latent but palpable. It was not a threat. It was a statement. A statement so profound it rendered all their debates, all their strategic considerations, utterly meaningless. The Xylo's hegemony was an infant civilization playing with stones next to a being that could move mountains. The news reached the Grand Conclave like a physical blow. The image of the Colossus filled the main hollow display, its silent, dark form dominating the chamber. Kale was speechless, his aggressive certainty replaced by a cold, hard shock. Even Vorlag felt a tremor of true fear, a primal terror he had not experienced since he was a youngling. The sheer, overwhelming scale of it was a form of violence in itself. It was a psychological weapon of devastating effectiveness. "They have shown their hand," Kale finally said, his voice a low, grim rasp. "This is the end of the dialogue. Now comes the ultimatum." The progenitors were in a state of collective panic. Their fleets, their proud armadas that had secured the hegemony for centuries, would be nothing but dust before a vessel of that magnitude. Their entire civilization existed at the whim of this silent, patient species that had, until this moment, pretended to be their equal. The humiliation was as profound as the fear. Aboard the Stardust Drifter, Kalis gathered what remained of his dignity. He turned to face Rostova, his posture as formal as he could manage. "Ambassador, it appears we have been negotiating under false pretenses. Your civilization's capacity is far greater than you led us to believe. What are your terms? What is it that you want from the Xylo's hegemony?" Rostova looked at him, and for the first time, Kalis saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't pity, it was empathy. "We want nothing from you, Ambassador," she said softly. "The arrival of the Resolution was not a threat, it was a contingency." "A contingency?" Kalis asked, his mind reeling. "Against what? Against our fleet of insignificant ships?" Before Rostova could answer, another alert sounded, this one far more urgent. A klaxon, low and insistent, began to sound throughout the human ship. On the main view screen, a new contact appeared. It ripped its way into reality with a shriek of tortured spacetime, a jagged, ugly tear in the fabric of the void. Where the human Colossus was a testament to design and order, this new arrival was a monument to chaos and malice. It was a dreadnought, but it was unlike any dreadnought the Xylos had ever conceived of. It was asymmetrical, a cancerous growth of sharpened spars, pulsating organic sacs, and glowing, blood-red energy sources. It looked less like a machine and more like a weaponized disease, a shard of pure hatred given physical form. Its energy signature was a chaotic scream of radiation and gravitational shear, causing the sensors on the Weaver of Paths to overload and fail. It radiated an aura of profound wrongness, a presence that felt ancient and utterly, irredeemably hostile. Kalis stared, his mind unable to process the second impossible arrival. The terror he had felt moments ago at the sight of the human Colossus was replaced by a new, more primal horror. The Colossus was a god. This thing was a demon. And then Ambassador Rostova spoke, her voice cutting through the rising panic with the clean, sharp edge of a diamond blade. She was looking at Kalis, at his stunned, terrified face, and her expression was one of sad, weary understanding. "That," she said, her voice now imbued with a terrible gravity, "is the contingency. The Resolution was never for you." A profound, shattering clarity washed over Kalis. The secrecy, the patience, the refusal to discuss military matters, the arrival of the impossibly large ship, it all clicked into place, forming a picture so vast and terrifying it stole the breath from his body. The humans had not been testing the Xylos, they had been protecting them. They knew this thing was coming. The entire diplomatic effort had been a screen, not to hide their own strength, but to prevent the Xylos from panicking, from acting rashly in the face of a danger they could not possibly comprehend. On the view screen, the Colossus began to move. It did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, vast sections of its hull slid open to reveal not cannons but emitters of pure, coherent spacetime. A lance of absolute darkness, a filament of localized, compressed gravity, shot from the resolution and struck the dreadnought. There was no explosion, no flash of light. The space around the alien vessel simply bent, warped, twisted in upon itself. The dreadnought's chaotic energy shields flared violently, screeching in protest as they were crushed by the raw, physical power of a fundamental, universal force. The dreadnought retaliated. It disgorged a swarm of smaller, parasitic craft that moved with unnatural, jerky motions, and it fired a beam of corrosive, entropic energy that seemed to age and decay whatever it touched. The beam struck the Colossus, and a section of the human ship's immense hull flickered, its metallic sheen turning dull and gray. But the damage was contained almost instantly by shimmering, hexagonal fields of pure energy that rippled across its surface like water. The battle was a silent, elegant, and horrifying ballet of physics. The human Colossus moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its every action precise and efficient. It was a surgeon excising a tumor. It used gravitational lenses to focus the light of the distant star into searing beams. It deployed fields of temporal distortion that caused the enemy projectiles to slow to a crawl, rendering them harmless. It was not fighting a war of attrition. It was deconstructing its opponent, piece by agonizing piece, using the very laws of the universe as its weapons. The Xylos, both in the Grand Conclave and aboard the Weaver of Paths, watched in absolute reverent silence. They were witnessing a conflict on a level of reality they had only theorized about. This was not war as they knew it. This was cosmic architecture being weaponized. The humans were not just a technologically advanced species. They were masters of the physical realm, custodians of forces the Xylos were only beginning to understand. Finally, with a last, desperate surge of energy, the dreadnought attempted to tear open another rift in spacetime to escape. But the Colossus was ready. It projected a vast, circular field of stabilized reality around the enemy ship, a cage from which there was no exit. Trapped, the dreadnought seemed to shudder, and then its chaotic energy core overloaded. It imploded in a silent, violent flash of crimson light, collapsing into a pinpoint singularity that winked out of existence, leaving behind nothing but a lingering, gravitational echo and a profound sense of violation in the void. Silence, the battle was over. The UNS Resolution hung in space, its surface showing minor scarring from the entropic beam, but otherwise intact. It had faced an entity of pure cosmic malevolence and had erased it from existence with calm, overwhelming, and terrifying efficiency. In the meeting room aboard the Stardust Drifter, the klaxons fell silent. The view screen showed the tranquil starfield, now blessedly empty save for the silent, watchful form of the Colossus. Ambassador Rostova turned her gaze back to Kalis. He and his delegation were frozen, their minds still struggling to encompass the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "Now," Rostova said, her voice gentle but firm, "perhaps we can begin a true dialogue, Ambassador, a dialogue based on shared context." In the Grand Conclave, no one spoke for a long time. The image of the Colossus was still on the holo display, but it no longer looked like a threat. It looked like a shield, a guardian. Strategos Kale stood rigid, his bronze carapace seeming to have lost its luster. He had been so wrong. His logic, the logic of a warrior, was built for a world of spears and shields, of empires and borders. He had no paradigm for this. He had mistaken a shepherd for a wolf, while the true wolf was hiding just beyond the hills. It was Archivist Lyra who finally broke the silence, her voice soft but filled with a new, profound awe. "They were protecting us," she whispered. "All this time, their secrecy was a kindness. They knew we were not ready to face this truth. They were trying to build a bridge of trust before showing us the abyss that lay on the other side." Hypergenitor Vorlag closed his ancient eyes, a wave of humility washing over him. The pride of the hegemony, their belief in their own wisdom and power, was a child's fantasy. They were not at the center of the galactic stage. They had been living in a quiet, peaceful corner, unaware of the ancient, cosmic war that raged in the darkness beyond. The humans had not come as conquerors. They had come as sentinels, standing watch over the cradles of younger civilizations, hoping to prepare them for the day when the darkness would inevitably come for them as well. Open a channel to Ambassador Rostova, Vorlag commanded, his voice filled with a new, unshakable resolve. Tell her that the Xylos' hegemony wishes to learn. We wish to stand with them. We are ready to listen. The new dialogue was one of genuine openness and shared purpose. The humans, now that the immediate threat was revealed, began to share their history. They were an old species, far older than their biology would suggest. They had risen to prominence in a galaxy rife with predators like the one they had just destroyed. They called them the Harvesters, or sometimes the Echoes of Entropy. They were not a conventional empire, but a cyclical galactic phenomenon, a force of nature that emerged from the deep voids between galaxies to scour civilizations, consuming their energy and knowledge before vanishing back into the darkness for eons. We do not know their ultimate origin, Rostova explained to Vorlag and the entire Xylos conclave via a secure transmission. The image of her calm, human face was now a source of comfort, not suspicion. They are a recurring extinction event. For millennia, our purpose has been twofold: to survive their passing and to find a way to end the cycle permanently. We seek out young, promising civilizations like your own not to rule them, but to form a network, a galactic concordat of life against the encroaching silence. The scale of humanity's mission was breathtaking. They were not just an empire. They were the self-appointed guardians of sentient life, fighting a lonely, timeless war against an enemy that was less a species and more a fundamental law of cosmic decay. The Colossus-class ships were not instruments of conquest, but mobile fortresses, arcs of last resort, and the ultimate expression of their will to endure. They were built to face horrors the Xylos could barely imagine. Why did one of them appear here? Now, Vorlag asked, the question that had been burning in his mind. Rostova's expression grew somber. That is the most difficult part of this conversation, hypergenitor. The Harvesters are drawn to complex energy signatures, particularly those associated with rapid technological or societal advancement. Your civilization has reached a critical threshold. Your growth, your expansion, your very vibrancy, it has become a beacon in the darkness. They were not here by chance. They were here for you. A cold chill passed through the conclave. They had been marked for harvest. Without the humans' intervention, their entire civilization, their art, their history, their memory would have been consumed and erased. They had been standing on the edge of a cliff, admiring the view, completely unaware of the abyss below. An alliance was forged not out of a treaty of equals, but out of a profound and humble understanding. The Xylos offered their resources, their unique biological insights, their vast network of observatories. The humans offered their knowledge, their protection, and a place in the larger galactic community. For the first time, the hegemony did not feel like a solitary island of light in the void, but part of a greater archipelago, a chain of life holding back a dark and hungry tide. Kale, the once suspicious strategos, became the most ardent supporter of the alliance, dedicating his fleets to work alongside the humans, retrofitting their ships with human-derived defensive technology, and learning the strategies of a war fought not for territory, but for existence itself. Months passed. The UNS Resolution remained in the Xylos system, a silent, reassuring presence in the sky. Human engineers and Xylos biologists worked side by side, their collaboration sparking a renaissance of innovation. The fear that had once defined their encounter with humanity had been replaced by a deep, abiding respect and a shared sense of purpose. The universe was far more dangerous than they had ever known, but for the first time they did not feel alone in it. It was during a joint deep space survey mission that the final, most profound piece of the puzzle was revealed. A human science vessel, working with a Xylos astrogation team led by archivist Lyra, was charting a region of space the Xylos had long called the Veil of Stars. It was a dense, turbulent nebula, opaque to most sensors, a place considered a natural but impassable cosmic feature. The humans, with their advanced gravimetric sensors, were able to peer deep inside it for the first time. What they found was not natural. Lyra was in the Grand Conclave, presenting the findings to Vorlag and the Council. The main holodisplay showed a swirling cloud of dust and gas. Then, as the human sensor data filtered in, the image resolved. The nebula was not a cloud at all. It was an exhaust plume, a trail of ionized particles and exotic matter stretching back for millions of light years, originating from a single point deep within the veil. And at that point was a structure. It is a megastructure of unknown origin and impossible age, Lyra explained, her voice trembling with awe. It predates our civilization, perhaps even the formation of this galaxy. Our sensors indicate it is a vast, artificial ring, larger than the orbit of our outermost planet. But it is dormant and has been for eons. A relic of a precursor race, Vorlag mused, his mind racing. Something more hypergenitor, Lyra said, her multifaceted eyes wide. She brought up another data stream, a complex waveform analysis. The structure is not completely silent. It is emitting a signal, a repeating, low-frequency broadcast. It is incredibly faint, degraded by time, but it is there. The humans have cross-referenced its signature with their historical data on the harvesters. She took a deep breath. It is a perfect match for the energy frequency the harvesters use for long-range communication. It is a beacon. The silence in the chamber was absolute, heavier than the stone of the mountain itself. The full, terrifying truth descended upon them. The harvesters, they are not a random phenomenon, Vorlag whispered, the realization dawning in his ancient mind. They are not just drawn to life, they are being summoned. Ambassador Rostova, present via the comm link, nodded slowly, her face a mask of grim confirmation. We always suspected there was a pattern, an underlying logic to their appearances that we could not decipher. We believed them to be a natural cycle of cosmic predation. We were wrong. They are not the storm. They are the lightning drawn to a rod. This structure, this beacon, is the source. It is what calls them out of the dark. And it has been sitting inside your territory, hidden in plain sight for all of history. The conflict was not a war against a force of nature. It was a war against an intelligence, a purpose that had been set in motion before any of their civilizations had even been born. The harvesters were a weapon, aimed and fired by an unknown, unseen hand. And the Xylo's hegemony, by a terrible twist of cosmic fate, had been born in the shadow of the weapon's trigger. Hypergenitor Vorlag rose from his dais and walked to the edge of the chamber, where a grand balcony overlooked the sprawling capital city under the light of its twin moons. He looked up at the night sky, at the soft, cloudy patch that was the veil of stars. For his entire life, it had been a familiar, comforting part of his world. Now he saw it for what it was, a shroud hiding the heart of a galaxy-spanning darkness. Their struggle had just become infinitely larger. Their enemy was not just the monstrous dreadnoughts, but the intelligence that had built the beacon, the ancient, unknown entity that had unleashed this plague upon the stars. Humanity had arrived not a moment too soon. Their appearance was not an accident of exploration, but a convergence of necessity, a fated meeting at the epicenter of the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. He felt a new emotion, one that superseded the humility and the fear. It was a sense of profound, terrifying purpose. Their two species, the patient, ancient guardians and the vibrant, young idealists, had been brought together here at this place to face the true, ultimate enemy. The journey had not ended with the alliance. It had just begun. And as he stared into the veiled darkness between the stars, Vorlag understood that the fate of everything that lived would be decided not in the grand halls of diplomacy, but in the silent, ancient depths of the abyss that had, for all of time, been their closest and most terrible neighbor.